The royal family has always been a stage for spectacle, intrigue, and quiet wars fought behind closed doors. But sometimes, those quiet wars erupt in ways that leave the world gasping. What if the tension you see on the surface, the polite smiles, the poised handshakes, the shared public moments, was only a fraction of what was really happening? What if the true story was darker, more complicated, and far more emotional than any tabloid dared to print? That is exactly the story we are about to unravel. It begins with a move so subtle, yet so seismic, that it changed the dynamics of the royal household forever. The move came from Meghan Markle, and it was aimed squarely at Kate Middleton. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine for a moment a seemingly ordinary royal engagement. Cameras flashing, dignitaries smiling, and the public cheering from behind barricades. Everyone sees the perfect image. 3 members of the most famous family in the world, appearing harmonious, flawless, united. But behind the carefully curated smiles, there was a tension simmering. A tension fueled not by policy disagreements or ceremonial rivalries, but by something far more human: jealousy. Meghan, whose every action had been scrutinized since the day she entered the royal orbit, made a decision that shocked those closest to her. She refused to let Prince Harry speak to Kate alone. Not in private corridors, not in drawing rooms, not even for a casual exchange that any sibling or cousin might find mundane. She imposed a boundary, and in doing so, she planted the seeds of what insiders would later describe as a quiet war. But why would she do that? On the surface, it might seem petty. A simple disagreement over etiquette, perhaps, or a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by media scrutiny. Yet the truth, as sources reveal, runs much deeper. Meghan's refusal was not just a moment of insecurity. It was a calculated, emotionally charged act. It was a move designed to assert control, to shape the narrative, to protect her perceived position within a hierarchy that she had been navigating since day one. And in this act, Harry found himself in the middle, torn between loyalty to his wife and a long-standing friendship, and perhaps more, for Kate Middleton. Harry, known for his fierce independence and loyalty, was caught off guard. He had always been someone who valued transparency, someone who believed in direct communication. Yet here he was, constrained, blocked, and subtly manipulated. Imagine being a husband, a son, and a prince, all at once, and suddenly realizing that your ability to speak freely with those you trust has been restricted, not by your family, but by your partner. The emotional weight of that moment cannot be understated. And it wasn't just the refusal that set tongues wagging. Soon after, Meghan went further, leveling accusations that would ripple through the palace walls. She suggested that Harry and Kate were teaming up against her. A casual observer might laugh off the statement as exaggeration or paranoia. But consider the context. This was a woman whose every action was magnified by global scrutiny, whose every word carried weight beyond the confines of private life. For Meghan to believe, even for a moment, that 2 people she had welcomed into her life were conspiring against her, speaks volumes about the undercurrents of tension that had already begun to flow beneath the royal surface. The story, however, cannot be fully understood without looking at the personalities involved. Kate Middleton, often described as poised, composed, and diplomatic, was thrust into a dynamic she had never signed up for. She had joined a family that had its own history, its own unspoken rules, and a public persona to maintain. While Meghan's actions might have been driven by jealousy or fear, Kate's response, quiet, measured, and strategic, added another layer of complexity. Observers describe Kate as someone who doesn't act impulsively. She observes, calculates, and responds with precision. That precision, in the context of Meghan's provocations, only escalated the tension. Now, add Harry into the equation. A man who has spent his life under the shadow of tradition and expectation, yet always sought to carve his own path. He was caught between the woman he loved and the family he cherished, in a delicate balancing act that left him emotionally exhausted. How does one navigate a world in which every personal decision is scrutinized, every private conversation potentially weaponized, and every family bond tested? For Harry, the answer was not simple. and his reaction to Meghan's move would set the stage for a series of events that no royal family insider could have predicted. What makes this story so compelling is not just the actions themselves, but the human emotions driving them. Jealousy, fear, loyalty, betrayal. These are universal experiences, yet magnified 1,000-fold when they occur within the walls of the most famous family in the world. When Meghan drew her line in the sand, she did more than create tension. She forced Harry to confront questions about loyalty, trust, and love that no outsider could ever fully comprehend. And as anyone who has ever navigated a complex relationship knows, once jealousy enters the equation, it rarely leaves quietly. The public, of course, had no idea what was happening behind the polished smiles and carefully staged photographs. Headlines read like fiction: Royal Rift, Meghan versus Kate, Harry torn. But the reality was far more nuanced and far more dramatic. Sources close to the palace described scenes of whispered conversations, subtle glances, and moments of tension so palpable that even seasoned courtiers reportedly felt the shift in atmosphere. The palace, often described as a fortress of tradition, became a backdrop for a personal drama that had implications far beyond the family itself. And yet, the story does not end there. Because Meghan's actions, while shocking, were only the opening act. The consequences would ripple outward, affecting relationships, public perceptions, and the very narrative of the royal family in ways that are still unfolding today. Harry's response, Kate's quiet strategy, and Meghan's escalating insecurities would converge in a drama that is as captivating as it is revealing, a story that forces us to question what we see versus what really happens. But what makes this narrative irresistible is the tension between visibility and secrecy. The world watches the royals, yet what is seen is often only the tip of the iceberg. Underneath lies a labyrinth of emotions, loyalties, and rivalries. Meghan's refusal to let Harry speak to Kate alone was more than a moment of jealousy. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited a chain reaction whose full impact only became clear later. It is a story of human emotion, amplified to epic proportions by fame, scrutiny, and expectation. By the end of this hour-long exploration, you will understand not just the facts of the situation, but the emotions that shaped them, the decisions that escalated them, and the consequences that continue to reverberate. You will see Harry as a man caught between love and loyalty, Kate as a figure navigating a minefield of expectations, and Meghan as a woman whose insecurities and ambitions collided in a way that altered the royal landscape forever. So, as we dive into the chapters ahead, ask yourself, what would you do if someone you trusted tried to control who you could speak to? How far would jealousy drive a relationship when fame and tradition magnify every slight? And most importantly, what came next in this royal drama that nobody saw coming? Because this story is far from over, and the first act, the refusal, the accusation, the tension, was only the beginning. What came next would change everything, and no one could have predicted the fallout. Have you ever witnessed a situation where everyone seems perfectly calm on the surface, but underneath, something is quietly boiling over? That's exactly the moment we step into now. The refusal, the accusations, the tension between Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and Kate Middleton. It all begins with a triangle, a royal triangle that no one outside the palace walls could have imagined. On paper, it seems simple. Harry, Meghan, and Kate, three people bound by family, friendship, and public expectation. But beneath that surface lies a labyrinth of emotion, jealousy, and unspoken rivalry. And the first cracks were already forming, subtle but undeniable. Harry and Kate have known each other for years. Their friendship predates Meghan. Shared experiences, mutual understanding, even family gatherings had cemented a bond that was quiet, supportive, and largely invisible to the public eye. Harry, by all accounts, trusted Kate. She was steady, reliable, diplomatic, someone who understood both the pressures of the royal life and the human need for private connection. Kate, in turn, respected Harry. She admired his willingness to break from convention at times, his humor, his ability to be candid despite living under constant scrutiny. It was a bond forged in shared experience and tested in moments that most of us would never even glimpse. Then Meghan entered the picture. From the moment Harry met her, the world seemed to shift. She was confident, ambitious, glamorous, and media-savvy. She had grown accustomed to being in the spotlight and, unlike many, she had learned to control how that light hit her. But stepping into the royal family brought a new set of challenges: tradition, protocol, public expectation, and yes, rivalries that had existed long before she arrived. Meghan was entering a world where loyalty was measured, behavior scrutinized, and mistakes could be catastrophic. And she knew it. The first subtle signs of tension were almost imperceptible. A glance that lingered too long. A laugh that seemed forced. A comment taken out of context. These small moments might have been insignificant to an outsider. But to someone living in the high-pressure, high-visibility environment of royalty, they were signals. Every gesture mattered. Every interaction was a potential spark. Meghan, despite her confidence, seemed to sense a line she could not cross, a sphere of influence that belonged, historically, to Kate. And that awareness began to manifest in small, strategic ways. Ways that, at first, Harry barely noticed, but that would later weigh heavily on him. It started with minor interventions. Meetings, gatherings, or even casual walks where Meghan would insist on joining or overseeing conversations between Harry and Kate. At first, Harry tried to dismiss it, thinking perhaps she just wanted to be included, to feel safe, to ensure nothing was misinterpreted. But then came the refusal, the moment that changed everything. Harry wanted to speak to Kate privately, something he had done countless times before without issue. A few minutes alone, a conversation about family matters, shared experiences, or even mundane royal logistics. Meghan refused. Not gently, not politely, but firmly, insistently, almost as if drawing a line in the sand. Why would she do that? Was it insecurity, fear, or a strategic move to assert control? Possibly all three. What's clear is that Harry felt constrained. He was suddenly navigating a delicate emotional minefield, one that required balancing loyalty to his wife with long-standing trust and affection for a longtime friend. And that balance was destabilized further by Meghan's next move: accusations. She suggested, subtly at first and then more openly, that Harry and Kate were teaming up against her. A small comment at first, easily dismissible, but repeated enough to gnaw at the edges of trust. Imagine being Harry in that moment. You are a husband. You are a son. You are a prince. And you are caught between two powerful forces, both of whom you care for deeply. Every decision feels loaded. Every word is scrutinized. Every glance is analyzed. How do you respond without causing further tension? How do you protect a relationship while navigating the minefield of jealousy, expectation, and protocol? For Harry, the answers were not simple. And for those watching from the outside, it looked like minor squabbles or media-fueled rumors. But inside the palace, it was anything but trivial. Kate's role in all of this is just as important. She is not someone who escalates situations unnecessarily. Her strategy has always been observation first, action second. When Meghan blocked Harry, Kate did not react impulsively. She remained composed, measured, and careful not to inflame a situation that could have been misrepresented in the press, or worse, destabilize the family further. Yet beneath that calm exterior was a growing awareness. The triangle was shifting. The dynamics she once understood were changing. A new force had entered the equation, and it was disrupting long-established patterns. And then came the subtle manipulations. Insiders suggest that Meghan's actions were rarely overt. There were no public arguments, no grand gestures of dominance. Instead, there were small, persistent actions that influenced perception, rewrote social scripts, and created doubt where once there had been trust. A misinterpreted look here, a carefully timed comment there, an insinuation disguised as concern. These actions were enough to unsettle even someone as steady as Harry, and they certainly made Kate pause and reconsider her approach. What made the situation even more volatile was the public element. Every interaction, every gesture, every decision was observed, reported, and magnified by the media. Leaks, both intentional and accidental, fed speculation. Rumors swirled. Fans chose sides. Online discussions dissected every nuance of body language and tone. What might have been a private disagreement became a spectacle, a story consumed by millions, debated endlessly, and used as evidence for wider narratives about Meghan, Harry, and Kate. And yet, even in this environment, the human emotions remained raw. Harry, despite being accustomed to scrutiny, experienced frustration, confusion, and heartbreak. Meghan, despite her confidence, experienced fear, jealousy, and a need for control. Kate, despite her composure, experienced irritation, caution, and an awareness that her every move could be misread. This was a collision of personalities, pressures, and perceptions, and the consequences would be felt for years to come. So, what exactly happened in that first private confrontation that no one outside the palace could see? Sources suggest it was brief, tense, and filled with unspoken understanding. Harry tried to assert his need to speak freely. Meghan tried to enforce boundaries. Kate, caught in the middle, observed. The emotions were complex. The stakes were high. And in those fleeting minutes, a dynamic was set that would define the next chapter of royal life. The triangle had emerged. It was delicate. It was combustible. And it was just beginning. The refusal, the accusations, the subtle maneuvers. They were all early warning signs of something bigger, something that would test relationships, loyalties, and the very notion of trust within the royal family. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming.